The RGCD C64 16K Cartridge Game Development Competition, try saying that 3 times fast, is one of those absolute highlights amongst the C64 scene. Offering more than a wide variety of great releases from developers new and old, it's led the way in lighting a serious flame into development of new games for the best 8-bit of them all. After a brief hiatus, it returns in 2019 offering a stupendous 20 new C64 games for us all to enjoy. As has been the case with previous years of the event, it's now time for me to show them all off. Though with the number of entries on offer, it only makes sense to split this up into a 2-part roundup, with this video featuring the first 10 of the games submitted. And with that, on with the show. This is Beyond the Scanlines, a series focusing on interesting games on classic computing and gaming platforms. Kicking things off alphabetically, and the first game is The New Dimension's Blastopia DX, the first of the 2 games they've submitted here. When first contact with an alien race goes wrong, they retaliate by sweeping up vast numbers of our camels and scattering them across 8 different worlds. It's now up to you in your Blastopia fighter to blast your way through, rescue the camels, and save the day, as is usually the case. As you fly across each planet, you'll need to blast the waves of enemy craft to release one of the trapped camels, which you'll need to sweep in and save before it falls off the bottom of the screen. When you've collected the level's quota, you'll need to find the landing pad, at which you'll touch down, which sets off the planet's bomb, and once the planet blows, you move on to the next one. The presentation side of things is great, offering up colourful visuals and a great soundtrack. The action, though, I found to be a little bit of a letdown. Part of it stems from how the enemy formations are handled, where they'll be spawned in once the previous is destroyed. I found it sometimes means you can't actually clear out a formation properly, as their flight path goes through the obstacles presented in the level. It also means that clearing some waves is for no good reason, as you cannot catch the camel drop before it clears the screen, at least without taking a major hit to your shields. Whilst Blastopia DX offers some interesting mechanical twists on the shooter formula, I found those same twists to get a little too much in the way of enjoying it to its fullest. Carrying on with a bit of a blasting theme, and the next game we're looking at is Death Weapon from the crew at C64 CD Labs. With this one, you're given control of a shiny experimental spacecraft named the Death Weapon, whilst deployed to a far-off station in preparation to halt an incoming invasion. As the aliens begin their invasion, it is now up to you, alone in the Death Weapon, to stem the upcoming threat. The Death Weapon is quite a unique craft, with your joystick moving it about on screen and firing your cannon in the opposite direction to your movement. Holding down the fire button instead allows your shots to be fired ahead of you, rather than behind. So, hold down fire to fire in the direction of movement, and let it go to fire in the opposite direction. Sound easy? Well, getting to grips with this is really the bulk of the challenge involved. Within each level, you'll simply just have to clear out the required number of enemies to clear the level's quota and proceed. Preferably as fast as you can. Because as with any shooter, it's the score that counts, and here a bonus counter is slowly ticking away. The other thing that's important with the shooter is tight controls, and despite the unusual method of firing, actually work quite well here, which is something that certainly is a bit of a highlight for sure. The same could also be said for the visuals. I'm really a fan of how the backgrounds have been set up, taking cues from the underrated as heck intensity, making for colourful station sections, adding more than enough detail to keep each level unique over a plain scrolling starfield. The core mechanics don't offer a great deal of depth here, but what is here really makes for a great challenge and plenty of fun shooting action. Leaving shooters behind, and a third game in the compo is Dice Skater by Gear Strong. I know when I originally saw the title, I felt a little bewildered by the game, but having now given it a bit of a good spin, it's one darn great fun time. The main mechanic here is straightforward, as you simply have to complete each stage by travelling across all 6 sides of the dice and light up the spots on each before your time runs out. Early on, this time limit is tough, but it's beatable. When moving on to later levels though, that is where things start to get tricky. Not only does the time limit get even tighter, but you'll also have to deal with many things like extra friction when crossing the spots, clearing the die in a particular order, and learning to navigate a network of wormholes. Plus so much more. What this results in is something which really fits the vibe of the contest. Well, it does for me at least. There isn't a gigantic list of mechanics here, just a core one offering plenty of twists and tricks to keep you engaged. The challenge really comes down from the time limit, as you are constantly on your feet skating to complete each level and learning to optimize your runs before the time runs out. The presentation and visuals here fit that early arcade aesthetic, offering a side panel and clear visuals of the die and your skater, ensuring you're not needing to decipher what is going on amongst the frenetic pace of the action. The soundtrack was greatly enjoyable to listen to, again making for an experience which, if anything, sums up what is best about the 16K Compo. New, focused fun experiences which offer something genuinely unique. The fourth submission is Doc Cosmos, developed by Evolute Games. You play said Doc as he adventures on an alien world for a device which is rumoured to allow for time travel. When finding the device, the Doc is stuck in a vast underground complex and it's up to you to navigate through the caverns for a way out. The device comes in very handy here as you can switch between the present day and 1982, which changes the graphics, Doc's jumping physics, and even adds items or removes them amongst the rooms. This really makes for a heck of a neat mechanic. You can only use the device a few times before needing to recharge it, so you really need to think about when you switch time periods to make sure you can get to a recharge station. What I also really dig is how it impacts the visuals. When in 1982, it looks like it's drawn out of pesky graphics, and the music is dropped back to a single channel of audio. Details like this really go a long way to make it feel completely different between the two periods. The results of this also mean you can't just jump about wildly. Instead, you need to think and ponder which period you need to be in order to make the jumps correct and get through each of the screens. Now, some may feel the puzzle platformer is a little overdone on the trusty C64, but a game like Doc Cosmos really shows there is a lot of unique tricks and mechanics which can be introduced to keep it fresh and give you such wonderful games to enjoy. Now it's time for some ice cold beer, as released by Megastyle. This is the first game submitted which isn't an original work, but rather an adaptation of a mechanical arcade game released by Taito all the way back in 1983. It's not your ordinary game, as your goal is simply to move the ball into the indicated bubble hole. This is done by moving the bar either on its left edge or its right edge using a pair of joysticks or the keyboard. The challenge here is having to be very precise. Very precise in moving the bar, as it feels a little too sensitive for me in working controls to line things up. That is probably a personal preference, more than anything though. The soundtrack is wonderful to listen to, though the way it restarts when starting a new game can be annoying, especially based on the average length of a game. At least it's what it was like when I was playing. The visuals are quite detailed and lovely, great artwork on the beer mug, and the ball itself is very clear to see across the backgrounds. Outside of the overly sensitive controls, this one is great to enjoy in short spurts. It's offering that pure arcade control experience, and really is the kind of game you don't really get to experience much on the C64 with its very unique control scheme. As with Ice Cold Beer, the next game, Lala Prologue, is also not an original for this competition. This one was originally developed for the ZX Spectrum by the Mojon twins and converted over by Digital Monastery, making it the first of the 3 entries they've submitted. As a student of the Great Witch Academy, Lala has caused a bit of an accident by trying off some spells and opening the window whilst her teacher is away on business, resulting in various magical items being scattered about the place. Obviously, this requires you to explore a giant maze of screens, collecting everything you find along the way. It sounds mostly straightforward, but unsurprisingly, this is pure 8-bit brutality in action. Part of it stems from the level design, where you need to jump from room to room with blind leaps, and that's something I find to be quite painful to encounter. Then, there's the collision physics. If you mistime a jump and you hit something, you'll bounce right off them. Bounce off them hard, and it can be distracting as all heck, especially when the result of it is that you land right back into another enemy, or a pit. Both of those sap even more of your energy and can lead to your eventual death quite quickly in some scenarios. Sure, there are the lollipops pickups which could restore some of your energy, but honestly it's not quite enough. One mistake can really rob you of quite a bit of it in no short order. Though, my thoughts here are quite funny. At the end of the day, this is really quite a Commodore conversion, offering tight controls and great visuals which are well translated from the source material. Personally, it's one I just found infuriating to play. It's one where if you're that bit more patient than I am, you're probably going to get a lot more out of it. It's one where I can certainly appreciate the work which has gone into it, even if it's one I don't enjoy playing. The final release from the new dimension is Let's Invade 2. As the name suggests, it's both a follow-up to a previous release of theirs, and, unsurprisingly, a take on Space Invaders. Now with psychedelic effects in the background. The core mechanics are no surprise here. Aliens move from side to side, then descend on reaching the edge. Blasting the upper saucer will give you an extra life, and that's mega handy. As well as blasting the occasional orange invader, they'll drop one of an assortment of pickups. These range from beneficial ones like improving your movement speed or your firepower, but also ones which hinder you. They'll give the aliens shields or dramatically increase their firing rate. Now what about these psychedelic effects, you ask? That really comes in form of the backgrounds. With their flashing and scrolling, it's certainly an element which is kind of unique, kind of introducing that element of chaos to the proceedings. Thankfully though, while you may think it's overbearing, it absolutely isn't here, and that's quite a relief, I'm sure, for a lot of people. There's also a lot of interesting options on offer. The biggest one allows you to choose between two different graphical styles, going from a more traditional C64 multicolour style and a dotted pixel style, which I feel is absolutely the better choice here, because it makes the proceedings feel far more visually distinct as a result. The music as well is more than appropriate for the game. It's offering that intense, pumping music which really befits the psychedelic effects and also the pacing. Overall, Let's Invade 2 doesn't really break much new ground, but it's one which was playable enough and kept me engaged for quite a fun gaming session. Well, this one really begs a question first. Can you out-Starforce Star Force? Well, if Neutron certainly doesn't, then it comes mighty close. Developed by Sarah Jane Avery, Neutron does for arcade classic Star Force what Galencia does for the likes of Galaga. Seriously. Across 9 challenging waves, you'll take your trusty starfighter on a mission of blasting everything that moves, alongside taking out plenty of ground defences along the way. As you dodge the waves of enemies, ones which will require plenty of skill in avoiding them, you run into power-ups which upgrade the firing capabilities of your fighter. You'll also encounter both mini-bosses and giant boss craft at the end of each stage, and considering the limitations of a 16K cartridge, this is probably the only point where things are a little repetitive, as the same boss is used across all the levels, and once you've powered up a bit, they're quite easy to dispatch. The visuals are clear and crisp, and considering the number of enemies which are thrown around on screen, there is absolutely no glitching on offer. At all. While the music isn't quite on the level of the visuals and the mechanics, overall though, it sits well enough in the background as you battle on. Certainly, quite the arcade feeling. All up, Neutron is an absolute top-notch C64 shooting experience, and one which will certainly test your shooting capabilities to the max. It's challenging, thrilling, exciting, and generally one of the most fun titles I've played on the C64 in 2019 so far. If you're a shooter fan, you absolutely have to check it out. Now, taking a bit of a step away from the hectic chaos of Neutron, and it's time for something a little more relaxing. Bit of puzzling action with Nono Pixie, the first of the 2 games submitted by the author of Space Moguls. Nono Pixie is a nonogram puzzler, best shown with the Picross series of games in which each puzzle is represented with a grid. Your goal for each is to reconstruct the target picture by lining up pixels within the grid using the numbers positioned to the left, indicating what you need to light up for a given row, and on top, indicating the same but for a given column. Using those, you need to systematically check off every pixel in order to solve the puzzle. One of the details I really love here is the control flexibility. You've got options here to use your trusty C64 joystick, alongside the keyboard, and yes, the venerable 1351 mouse. In grabbing the footage for this roundup, I stuck with the joystick controls. Whilst I didn't get to try out the mouse controls, I was more than satisfied with how the joystick happened to work in selecting and deselecting pieces of the grid. Like any good puzzle game, the atmosphere is relaxing, with some clean background images on offer, and some very chilled music to enjoy as you decipher the clues. Even better is that there is no pressure at all here. You don't have any time limits to beat, no bonus points to earn, it's chilled out solving of puzzles. It's quite a unique game to find in a competition like this, but I truly feel it's such a great fit. Another incredibly welcome addition is that there's no passwords to worry about, or needing to beat all 100 puzzles in a single session. Instead, right from the main menu, you're welcome to start at any one of them. That's right, they're all unlocked right from the very start. A truly wonderful addition to a very fun game. Coming to the halfway point of this roundup, and we're looking at Out of Ink. Now, first impressions may have you believe it's just another platforming game, but here the focus is more on technical challenge, over say collecting stupendous numbers of items, or solving puzzles to make your way through a stage. Each level takes place on a single screen, and your task is straightforward. Jump on each of the yellow enemies, then make your way to the exit point, as fast as possible. This is really where the challenge comes in, because the game tracks how long you've taken to clear out each stage as you go through the game. And sure, it sounds kind of easy, but the levels will get devious in no short order. Mastering your available skills is important. From the simple double jump to being able to bounce off walls in a form of wall climbing, all of them are essential to being able to beat your best times over multiple plays of the game. The one pain point I have is that it feels a little unapproachable to start with. The first tutorial stage has you simply go for the exit, and the second introduces the requirement to take out enemies. Now that in itself is fine, but the game doesn't really communicate that you need to do this, and so when starting out, I certainly found myself a little lost during that first play session. It doesn't seem like much, but I can imagine it's something which could throw potential players off the game, and I think it's a bit of a shame as a result. Out of Ink offers quite an interesting set of mechanics which can keep you engaged if you get hooked on it, especially in having to master your movements and how the game's physics respond. Plus, having it track your completion times in each stage is plenty of incentive to go back and try to go for a new personal best later on down the line. With 20 entries in the contest, I certainly couldn't cover them all in a single video, especially if I want to offer some useful discussion for each of them. So as we reach the halfway point, I'm going to take a breather here and split things up, with part 2 covering the last 10 games that were submitted, and allow me to offer some of my own final thoughts and choice picks. If you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, why not let me know what your picks were? If you want to catch the next part as soon as it drops, consider subscribing to the channel, and yes, making sure to ring the bell as well. Most importantly, thank you all so very much for taking the time out to enjoy this first part of the roundup, and the second part will be coming soon.